Welcome to our Conversations with Clients webinar. I'm Priti Bansel-Branch, Assistant GC here at Shoosmiths. This is the 6th session in the series, and today we'll be talking with Angela Yotov, Group GC at Close Brothers, about diversity and inclusion within in-house teams. Welcome, Angela. We'll also be joined by Sophie Cowen, who is the Head of Diversity and Inclusion here at Shoosmiths. Welcome, Sophie. Please do connect with us on LinkedIn by scanning the QR codes, which will also appear at the end of the session. We're keen today to use this forum to discuss some practical steps that in-house teams can take to progress the agenda within their own organisations. So before we get started, I'm just going to quickly run through some housekeeping notes with you. All guests are muted on arrival and your videos have been turned off. If you're struggling to hear us, please have a look at your audio settings by clicking on the arrow next to the mute button as shown on your screen now. The session is being recorded for external purposes and will be emailed to you next week. If you have any questions for the panel, please submit them through our Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them if our time allows. So without further ado, let's get started. Sophie, Angela, it's great to speak to you both today. Angela, our first question for you is what is the driving force behind your commitment to D&I? We're mindful that you do so much, and it'd be really interesting to hear how you got there.
Thanks, Priti. I think my driving force for D&I is to have an environment where people can thrive, where people can be themselves, respected and valued, and also just having a work and be themselves, which is an environment where they don't have to mask else, because that's exhausting and it's also not right. You know, to invest in my colleagues and my team, and least of all, you know, when perform better, you know, leaders make better decisions and do better when there's cognitive diversity. Cognitive diversity is it's really important to hear diverse points of view, different ideas from different experiences and backgrounds, and I'm, you know, it's the right thing to, we try to do things, and I very much as a leader try to do the thing in the right way, and this is certainly falling in within that. See what what motivates my teams. You know, you need to look at just a lawyer or someone in COSEC. We are holistic people. Find out what matters to people, what drives them. People have lives outside and they need to be balanced. So you know, those are big drive. I too am a holistic person. I am a female woman from a diverse background, so there are several kind of diversity strands that mostly with. At Close, I have spent 3.5 years being the sponsor for the Working Parents and Carers Network. Parent, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. I've also been a carer for passed away a couple of years ago. So you know, that really try and you know, for me, it's a constant challenge juggling, you know, trying to do the best I can at work in a demanding role, but and you know, juggling 2 small people at the same time. Felt very strongly, particularly during COVID, that you need a bit of solidarity. You need, you know, in a similar boat, and we had some great virtual clearly, particularly that area was time poor during, it got some really nice feedback about actually hearing about what it's just letting off some steam, or just saying, look, this worked for me, this did know about these resources. The company, has these emergency days, it also has emergency, etc., etc. And now I've just moved off of that work as the executive sponsor, and I'm the executive sponsor now for the my personal my 8-year-old has recently been diagnosed with autism. It's going to continue to be a journey. I found it quite difficult and it's very difficult to navigate around what can do, and I've found that having that, particularly in neurodiversity, but obviously the accessibility stream covers all sorts of, has been helpful as well. The other I find quite useful is just learning different networks, and I've been doing some first mentoring, but someone mentioned actually mutual mentoring was a nice phrase. Agree, in every relationship, mentoring relationship, it's both ways. I've been being mutually mentored by some of the senior in the LGBTQ plus network and the diversity network as well, and have found it really interesting to talk about language and unconscious bias and microaggressions, and things like that, just to itself, so I can be a better ally and show up better for those networks.
It's a really interesting way of explaining it, mutual mentoring. I really like that. That's not something I've heard of before, but I think it's a great idea. We've done something similar, haven't we, Sophie? We've done a reverse mentoring here at Shoosmiths, which I think has worked really nicely, and I think the idea is similar, that we speak with somebody of any level, really. Could be, I was partnered with somebody from the board, and that was a really nice way of discussing my intersectionality, as well as board members understanding the differences that face each of our employees as well, which is really nice. It's really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, definitely, Priti. We focused on kind of that reciprocal mentoring, which sounds, quite similar, as you say, with board members and our employee networks here as well. So there is something in it for each side, and a great learning opportunity, and something that's relatively simple to implement within kind of your teams, for example, and really give some tangible results quite quickly.
Yeah. What did you find were the benefits of doing that, Angela?
Hugely beneficial. I think everyone has kind of a responsibility to educate themselves, quite time poor, and the best be asking people who felt really passionate about their particular areas to where they were coming from, and also to understand sort of the subject better, clearly in the background. I want to be watching the relevant kind of films or listening to podcasts, but I kind of know moment, again, with a young family and a demanding role, you've utilize the tools at your disposal, and I guess it just sort of teaches me how much I don't know, and even that is an important lesson.
And that leads us nicely onto our next question, really, which is how are Close Brothers implementing D&I as an in-house legal team across your operations and the legal services that you procure?
Well, we have, so I guess there's the initiatives as an umbrella, and then, you know, the separate things or complementary things that we, so, you know, the partnerships that we have at a Close Brothers level, and obviously we feed into those and participate, are things like the 30% Club, Black Interns, Upreach, Stonewall, Race at Work Charter, and Women in Finance. In terms of the in-house team, obviously, as I said, we participate in those partnerships, which I think are fantastic. We're also signatory of the General Counsel for Diversity and Inclusion across the legal industry. You may have heard of that. At the time we signed, there were 120 signatories. I'm sure there are by now, but basically it's you know, it's an initiative owned and the in-house community, but lots of law firms across the industry are also sort of you know, partnering change and the support statement, you know, promoting equity and diversity and inclusion across the legal sector, defining and sharing best, defining KPIs and metrics to measure success, and encouraging in steps which support greater D&I within legal teams. Very much, as you would have gathered by the fact that law firms and, you know, recruiters are partners, to have a collaborative model, inviting them to participate, and the point is, so we will have kind of work with other diversity initiatives in the legal sector to generate and avoid duplication of efforts. So, you know, it's we don't want to no point, and we also don't want to get law firms to churn out lots of different types of, because that's a waste of your time in terms of reinventing the wheel, and it just makes the same type of information, and really hone what that is. That's what, you know, important metrics, and a lot of work has been undertaken by D&I, and it continues to be undertaken.
Yeah, I think
we're very much signed up and about that.
And I think, Angela, it's an important reminder that, you know, there's no one silver bullet solution to this D&I area of work. You know, it is about that collaboration and how, you know, you can work together, you know, with your legal service providers, how we can work with our clients to kind of impact the industry more widely as well, whether that be co-collaborating on internships, which I know we've done here at Shoosmiths before, or doing some of that, you know, to go back to mentoring, cross-mentoring as well. I know the 30% Club helps facilitate that really well and drive change in the industry as a whole.
No, and very much agreed, and you know, it's important for us to collaborate and have the constant dialogue that I do with my relationship partners. Law firms are doing about saying, well, you know, this is the team. At first blush, this doesn't look terribly diverse. Obviously, there are some characteristics identifiable and others, rightly so, are not. But it's having that two-way dialogue. Are you doing what you can be doing, and are we doing the same thing? I think said collaboration is a real key, and you know, we are like wanting our law firms to provide certain data again, that as part of our panel process, we're putting in place a panel light group of businesses, and so one size, but you know, having those conversations table, and again on an ad hoc basis when teams are fielded, to be in a positive way.
Definitely. I think it's interesting you mentioned there around kind of, asking around representation data. And I know prior to this call, we kind of had a question around, what's the difference between diversity and inclusion? And I think that diversity piece is that representation, and that can be really broad, some of that being the protected characteristics that we see in our equal opportunities, or the cognitive difference which you referenced, Angela. And inclusion is that, for us, that piece of, do those people feel like they belong? Can they contribute openly and freely, and also progress? And that's where I think we can have really interesting dialogue across the two companies, is that inclusion piece, right? Diversity is the snapshot data, and inclusion is how everyone has a seat at that table to contribute.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, do they feel accepted, and their contribution valued?
Absolutely. And I think that the GC for D&I sounds really interesting as well, and touching on that a little bit, sort of helps in-house teams and private practice to work together. But how do you think, Angela, how do you think we could work together to drive change for everyone across the legal sector, taking GC for D&I as an example, and any sort of equivalent programs? Would training sessions or skills, or perhaps touching on how you use terminology, would things like that be helpful, do you think?
Yes, definitely. As I said, I found it particularly useful in my mutual mentoring to really sort of have a safe space to ask silly questions about and really understand the perspective of others in that area. For me, technical training is a given. Training, including in areas such as D&I, are really important. Education piece and helping people understand and become allies, something that the law firms can help the in-house teams with, for sure. And I think in-house teams will butt your hands off to sort of have on that, and thoughts around that. I think that's really helpful, and there are all sorts of mentoring sort of schemes and the ways you can cut that. I think that law firms and in-house teams can do together. I think that there's, as well as I mentioned, that kind of dialogue, and the teams that are put together for certain transactions or pieces of work, the extent appropriate, having conversations to specifically mention that. So not as an aside, general counsel picks up on it. It's okay, we put this team together because he's on this different experience, this different background, this different perspective.
Absolutely. It's absolutely vital to get all of that thinking mixed up, and to provide you with the best results as well as our client. And I think that's so important, isn't it, to make sure that we have everyone in the room and the best people in the room, and we recognise that the best results will be from a mixed group of people, not necessarily from those who think the same and do the same, and learning about people's backgrounds, or having that with you in the room gives you different perspectives on different matters. I think that's key, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. So I can't see any questions in the Q&A, but Angela, it'd be really helpful to understand what training you've actually received from your private practice teams, your external counsel. Which ones have worked really well for you? Have you had any that have worked better than others? Anything that's really stood out for you?
So I haven't had any specifically in relation to D&I, lots of technical training, but I think that's less of a offering, or at least has been to date. I've started seeing things in you know, some talks on neurodiversity, and so, but that hasn't been prevalent in my sort of experience up to now. And I think, you know, it's also an opportunity for the law firms like yourselves to not talk to the legal team, but to the wider business, and you know, the businesses that both internal and external legal.
We've actually had a question through. Can you give some examples of KPIs that have been useful in determining progress in this space? And I suppose perhaps that's more in relation to your external counsel. Is there anything that's specific that you ask of your external counsel that that helps in the progression of D&I?
We're only just putting ours together, because we're in the putting in our panel light, sort of law firms looking to some of the KPIs that are being used by the GC D&I. I mean, I think that the tricks more generally are, you know, some of the initiatives, some of the gender, you know, what you're doing, etc., in terms of social diversity, and is in respect of different types of protected characteristics extent available. And then, you know, sort of GCs on particular matters over a year, I'd expect to step back and sort of say, well, these are the big kind of transactions or projects, and ostensibly, you know, this looks like a very diverse group that were supporting us, or this didn't, but we understand that, as I said, the characteristics are obvious, or sort of visible. So it's always a two-way kind of dialogue, a collaboration on these things.
And if I might take that question a bit broader as well, if you're just thinking about various D&I initiatives that you have within your in-house teams, you know, for that inclusion piece, you might want to use engagement score metrics. So we're not solely focusing on representation data within teams, but, you know, what are you seeing in those engagement surveys? Or again, not just looking at representation, but looking at your progression and promotion rates. You know, is that reflective of your population, or is there a demographic that is, you know, progressing at a quicker rate than others? And again, interesting to look at your retention as well of people, and that is a real indicator of inclusion. If people stick around or choose to leave an organisation, that shows there might be some work to do around inclusion. So again, not just thinking about X number or X percentage, but really looking at the attrition and progression rate can be really telling.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Sophie. Sorry, Angela.
Yeah, we do that. Sorry, we do that internally in terms of our scores. You know, it's all anonymous, but we can cut things down by sort of gender, ethnicity, etc., and try and see if there are any. And as you say, the law firms can do that too, and it's whether or not you balance. We obviously don't want you to dump in the kitchen sink, but it's what we can do and work in collaboration with you on to really get the best picture, and also to you know, not only do the law firms want to do the right thing, but it's part of their service to the in-house teams is or held to account, then that is also a driver for change.
Yeah. We've had a question through actually that ties in quite neatly with what you've just mentioned there, Angela. It says, how have you approached the challenge of obtaining demographic data and people not wanting to identify or represent? Is that something that you've come across?
That is a challenge. I think it kind of goes to engagement. Aren't comfortable sort of specifying what into. Even them saying I don't want to say helps with engagement, have a better understanding of what your workforce looks. But I think that's it has to be people wanting to give that information, and I think I guess it's a situation of people gradually becoming more comfortable and feeling like not only our firm but society at large is more of a size for them to to be more which area that they kind of affiliate within. So I guess it's not easy. I think it's a slow, we are progressing and things are going in the right direction too.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, it really is about building that trust in the communication of why you're asking for that data and being really transparent about, the purpose of that data. Because obviously, this is really individual and really personal to somebody. So, I think that works really well if you can build that trust. And actually for, I guess, any of the in-house teams on the call, all private practice, large firms have to disclose on a biannual basis to the SRA their diversity data and make that available on their external website. So, if you are wanting to look at different organisations that you're thinking of working with, that's an interesting place to start, as well with those the regulatory requirement we have to the SRA as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you both. I'm really mindful of time. We do have a couple of questions left, but I'm not sure we're quite going to get to them. So I'm just going to quickly recap and then it will go back to the questions if we have time. There have been some absolutely brilliant suggestions. I'm sure the audience will agree today. And so just to sort of take a few of those takeaways that you've spoken about, Angela and Sophie, in relation to perhaps the mutual mentoring that you've found really, really helpful to open those discussions and to have those discussions in a sort of a more a formal but informal forum, if you see what I mean. It allows people to be a bit more open to discussing those issues that perhaps they wouldn't necessarily be prepared to otherwise. Talking about those partnerships internally and having initiatives in place such as those reverse or mutual mentoring sessions. Thinking about using GC for D&I or similar initiatives externally, which help to define and share those KPIs, so you're not having to do it all by yourself. You're all talking about it together. We are all talking about it together, which is really helpful. And those that help us support D&I within our in-house teams as well. Training for D&I, which perhaps you might want to ask your external counsel to help you with and work with you. And obviously we spoke about dialogue as well, and those teams that are put together for full transactions and looking at the data and the demographics of those teams that work on those transactions. I think we've run out of time really, which is such a shame because it's such an interesting area to discuss, and we could be here for hours really, couldn't we? But just to say thank you very much, Angela, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your ideas and your thoughts with us. It's really very much appreciated. And thank you very much to our audience also. Please do spare a few minutes to complete the feedback survey, which is going to pop up on your screen after you exit the webinar, which will help us to tailor these sessions more closely to your needs as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.